it seems initially that it is a slight upward move, but nothing substantial. And it makes me wonder to what extent the Trump factor or the Trump trade, as some have been calling it, already is priced into these markets.
Look, Kayleigh, I think equities are going to do what equities are going to do. I think equities this year are in a very specific position with respect to what's going on politically with Trump and Biden, what's going on, frankly, even with the Fed to a degree. I think it's really an earnings-driven rally here. To me, I think the much more important question for the markets is what's going to happen with the bond market. If we emerge with a narrative over the next week or two that Trump is by far the leader here, a decisive leader. He's going to win in November and maybe pulling a fair amount of Congress with him. That has huge implications in my mind for much more for the bond market than for the equity market.
What do you make of the advance in Bitcoin here, Michael? Tom Keene pointed that out to us. It's not an element that we've had in past crises like this one.
Look, Bitcoin, like we had this horrible event happen yesterday. Bitcoin's the only asset that's been trading since the event happened. So I really don't ascribe much to the fact if Bitcoin was up 10% or down for 10%, I really don't ascribe anything to that. To me, what's going to be much more important is what happens when the markets get going tomorrow morning in New York. There with the major asset classes. I think Bitcoin, frankly, is a bit of a sideshow. I wouldn't try to divine too many insights as to what that is going to tell us about how equities or in bonds are going to be trading there. I do think that if Trump is going to be even more sort of presumed to be the winner in November, then I think there's a pretty good narrative that gold is going to get a bid here. There, because I think the way I size it up is that if Trump wins and wins with some support from Congress, right? Maybe not a full red sweep, but enough. Yeah. That you see that what you're looking at for the markets is sort of a three pillars of a stool where you have a loose fiscal, loose monetary regime combined with higher tariffs than what Biden would offer and the deportation. So that sort of three stars line up for me. The concurrence of those three pillars lines up for me for a very pro-inflationary outlook, which means gold gets a bid, and it also means that the back end of the Treasury curve sells off. Coming back to equities, this sounds trite perhaps, but I really think that equities are going to do what equities are going to do, and I don't know if there's a huge amount of daylight for the S&P 500 between a Trump victory and a Biden victory. Look, if it's a red sweep versus a blue sweep, maybe that's a different discussion. But for some sort of Trump win, but with, sort of gridlock, or Biden wins with gridlock, I think equities are going to do what equities are going to do. I really don't look at that as consequential. What's really important, though, is the bond market.